One of the things that I've heard and I regularly talk about really is in terms from a traditional gyms, how many people are coming back as a percentage as it relates to pre-pandemic. And, there seems to be a range from around about 60 to sort of 80%, not some exceptions are getting everybody back, but there's a lot of people seem to be, there's still quite a way to go before they're in those pre-COVID numbers. Do you have any data from the boutique studios? And I know it's probably going to be different by country as certain, like the US has been open for a while and the UK is only just open. But do you have any indication in terms of, what percentages that people are achieving in the studios?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And like you said, it is so specific to location. And it was really, gut-wrenching, but also interesting to have the global perspective during the pandemic of seeing which countries responded the quickest, reopened, that second wave, that third wave. Some of them are still in it. Certain counties like LA, they're back on a mask mandate, regardless of status. So it's always in flux. And we don't have specific percentages, this percentage of our users are back because we are so hyper localized and in all of these markets. But I would say that we have a lot of data on comeback trends. 9 of the 10 most booked experiences right now on ClassPass are in-person experiences. And those that are going back are like coming back with a vengeance. It's really encouraging. Of the users that return to class, their usage on ClassPass, so how much they're going to class, is actually 10% higher than it was in the same month before the pandemic in 2019. And that's globally. In the US, it's actually 13% higher. And you mentioned the UK. The week in May that the UK started offering group fitness in person again, ClassPass saw a 600% increase in memberships in the UK. And so that's definitely a trend that we're seeing. People want to get back in person, regardless, kind of across the board.
Right. Another interesting observation that we're seeing is people are not necessarily going back to work or back into the office. And so, people are, let's take a city like New York or London or somewhere like that, where people probably travel into the center, and a lot of the concentration of boutiques have historically been around there. Have you seen any changes in terms of the sort of locations where people are going to work out now post-pandemic? Are you seeing some of the sort of more suburban types of locations are becoming quite popular at different times than what they were before, or any kind of geographical observations that are worth talking about?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. For me, I'm really focused on this topic specifically as we look to rebuild the industry. Pre-pandemic, you can imagine, like take New York City, the mecca for fitness. There was always more demand than supply. It could support, we had over 1,000 studio partners like in the New York metro area alone, and constantly growing. And that was just fitness before we even introduced wellness. I would say that question has an answer that's going to continue to unfold. And it's interesting at ClassPass to sort of be at the cross section of that, because we know, not just where someone is searching on their app. Are they searching for a boxing studio in Flatiron during this time? We also know sort of where they are when they're searching. And so whereas before we could see, okay, FiDi is less popular. People are searching there on their phones, but it's because they work there. They'd actually prefer to take a class more where they live in the residential areas of the city. And so you would see sort of fitness studios evolve in that way. We never really reached high density in the financial district, for example, in New York. It just didn't work out. A lot of people who worked there worked long hours, and so they were more going on weekends, things like that. Now we're seeing, to your point, who has left the city. It's also interesting to think about. ClassPass started in 2013, like I mentioned in the beginning. Our users are aging with our product, and that's why evolving to credits and wellness and different offerings is interesting, as the pandemic has accelerated this move out of cities in some cases. So we don't think it's a situation where, New York City is not going to be a fitness mecca. New York City will also always be super dense, an area that is known for fitness, where there's a high appetite, there's a high demand for fitness. But the question that's unfolding now is, of the people who are leaving, where are they popping up? what suburbs did they move to? Did they move to Westchester? Did they move, to Connecticut and the surrounding areas, which ClassPass does have a studio network in the suburbs? Or have they moved to cities like Austin or Portland or, West Coast cities or something like that? And so I think that is a question that a lot of our surviving studio partners are asking, that we will be sort of unveiling data on as time goes on. And I think that's just an interesting point about this data in general, right? Like, this is all incredibly interesting and very specific to the moment. And so it's about continually refreshing the data as well and saying, okay, how does this change in the winter? How does this change when people are back to school? How does this change in the new year? And just continually like refreshing and adapting the business based on what's happening in the moment.
Mm-hmm. What are you seeing in terms of pricing? Because I know there definitely seems to be a shortage of people, like in any, whether it's hospitality or in the fitness industry, people seem to have found other things, particularly trainers that have gone off and set their own boot camps and things up like that. So there's probably a lack of staff, and bringing them back, people seem to be having to pay a little bit more for that. Are you seeing any changes in terms of pricing? Is it going down because people are trying to do promotions to get people in, or is it staying the same, or are you seeing any increases?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And again, it's another one that is always more complicated than a straightforward answer. It's highly dependent on context. I would say a lot of it is intuitive. Right when studios started to reopen, New York City is a great example. In sort of May or June, it had been closed for over a year and never reopened. And so studios were hit hard. A lot of closures, unfortunately. And of the studios that were left, they tended to have a strong community. People understood that capacity was restricted and they were willing to pay a little bit more. That is, unfortunately short-lived. There's a lot of other factors that go into, will that trend stay? And we think the answer is no. The fact of the matter is, unfortunately, people have lost their jobs because of COVID. It's summertime in a lot of these cities. People are finally out for the summer. Fitness may not be top of mind for a routine in the next month or 2 or 3. And so we're seeing that strong return. We're seeing that strong willingness to pay. We're seeing that interest for sure. But we have to keep in mind that people also want to do other things. The summertime could be a little bit slow. The heat can affect a lot of different genres. Does someone want to do hot yoga in the summertime? Or, summertime is a great opportunity to work out outside and get back into nature. And so are people picking that over boutique fitness? That's why we just always default to, revenue maximization through algorithms. So we can make all of these assumptions. Super interesting to kind of see what the trends are. But at the end of the day, our algorithms price in real time. Our algorithms read historical fill data and they compare it to what current fill is, and they will release more spots in classes. If fewer spots are being booked, they'll price them higher and release fewer if they're in higher demand, because willingness to pay goes up. And by sort of following the trend in real time without actually having to take action, we know that we're revenue maximizing at any time, and we'll be able to follow that curve. So perhaps in the fall, when people are coming back, we'll see what the trends are, and it will automatically sort of adjust on ClassPass. At the end of the day, we show users different credit prices and they tell us what they're willing to pay. Obviously, our goal is to revenue maximize, but user behavior is, human behavior. It's a huge piece of the puzzle here.